Welcome to our 31st Salon of the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through series, hosted by Genevieve Vaughan and the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. I'm your moderator today, Letecia Layson, and we're joined by Nané Jordan, who's calling in from Canada, and Darsha Navarras. Nané and Darsha will speak for about 25 minutes each, which will give us time at the end of our session for questions. So let's begin. Nané Jordan will be our first speaker. She is a birth keeper, mother, scholar, artist, and community worker with a working background in pre-regulation Canadian midwifery. She was an SSHRC postdoctoral fellow in women's and gender studies at the University of Paris 8 and completed her doctorate in education and an MA in women's spirituality. Nané cultivates Feminist, woman-centered scholarship and art making within gift-centered communities of Mother Earth connecting consciousness. Her work explores mothering, midwifery, birth giving, placentas, and the gift economy, women's spirituality, feminist art, and goddess studies, and includes editing the anthologies, Placenta Wit, Mother Stories, Rituals, and Research, and her recent book, Pagan Goddess Mother, both from Demeter Press. Nané lives in Vancouver, Canada, with her husband and young adult daughters. Welcome, Nané.
Hi. Thanks so much, Letecia and Jen and Diane and everybody supporting these salons to happen. I'm really excited to present today. I've been a part of the network, the Gift Economy Network, for many years, and really just really excited to share my work again in this salon context. So I did prepare a written paper. I'm going to read it. It's about 20 minutes, and I do have some slides, but I want to share them afterwards and just kind of look at some images with everybody. They're mostly pictures of the placenta, just to kind of go along with the materials I'm talking about. But the title of my paper is Placental Roots for Nourishing a Maternal Gift Economy of Birth. And I really did need to write it in a paper because I didn't think I could organize my thoughts to get all of this across. So I'm going to just start reading this for you. And I'm going to open with a quote. I was just on this beautiful kind of webinar, and Manulani Meyer, who's a Hawaiian Indigenous philosopher practitioner, just said this beautiful thing. So I'm quoting from her. She said, "Return to the love of mother. Make us students of beauty again." So this talk comes out of my birth-based scholarship on themes of the maternal gift economy through placental roots, highlighting the importance of the quality of mother's birth-giving experiences. For almost 40 years, birthwork and inquiry has been the avenue of my own embodied spiritual journey and work as a healer in, for, and with mothers giving birth, leading me to focus my scholarly work on women's birth stories as lived through empowering holistic reclamations of physiologic birth, supported through midwifery doula and free birth social movements. My work includes an edited anthology about placentas titled Placenta Wit, where authors and I explore current practices of mothers and others who are reclaiming birth and placenta powers. This birth work is lived in community with others, where I want to acknowledge the many mothers and others worldwide reclaiming birth as sacred mother power. In speaking from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, I acknowledge my presence on these ancestral lands as second-generation Irish and Bridget Isles originated immigrant settler in Canada. I want to highlight the empowering birth work of Indigenous mothers and doulas here in British Columbia, and women seeking birth justice through BIPOC and racialized communities for all mothers to access compassionate, decolonizing, culturally safe birth support. When in my 20s in the 1990s, I was exploring midwifery and birth through an ecofeminist lens. I wanted to highlight the contrast of the medical system with holistic midwifery-based care in how mothers experience giving birth in these differing paradigms, with more positive experiences emerging through midwifery-led care. Birth giving or birth gifting as an embodied sensory, meaning of the body and senses experience, deeply matters to mothers and babies' quality of life. Through an ecofeminist lens, the medicalized control of birthing mothers is intertwined with our modern desecration of and disconnection from Mother Earth, where patriarchal industrial societies are suffering traumatic detachment from the magic of our own bodies and the beauty of the natural world. Especially as resources, the stuff of life in the more than human world of trees, plants, animals, and energy sources are extracted, taken without limit by industrial plundering to amass wealth for some while depriving others. This dynamic fuels colonization of peoples, lands, women's bodies, and wombs. Once I discovered the work of Genevieve Vaughan pointing out the maternal gift economy, I could further identify how the market appropriates the gifts of birthing mothers and the gifts of Mother Earth in unison. If we could collectively practice respect and joyful gratitude for the gifts of Mother Earth, we would surely honor the obvious sacredness of mothers giving birth. Birthing mothers have embodied physiologic hormonal capacities well honed over millennia of human development, what I would call our embodied birthing gifts and the resources of our own bodies. For babies, birth is our earliest human experience beyond the womb. And for mothers, birth carries a birthright of felt intensity and relief, of being honored as sacred beings who give birth. Mothers gestate and gift life to new beings, an originary understanding of the gift economy. Yet, the embodied birthing gifts of mothers are appropriated and subjugated within patriarchal, exchange-based market systems of so-called care, which are not really systems of care in the sense of offering compassionate relational attunement to mothers' needs, but management regimes that reduce birth to timed protocols, leading to what midwives call the cascade of interventions. Within this system, mothers themselves may not know or believe their own bodies hold originary birth power, nor how to access such or receive embodied support in the overwhelming yet transformative rite of passage that giving birth is. The medicalization of birth is a tentacle of the patriarchal market economy where birth has been monetized through the technology-infused management of mothers' labors that deems itself necessary while overriding birthing capacities. Clear the throat on all this medicalization. It's as if mothers cannot give birth without the apparatus of the system of exchange, which becomes the birth giver. In this transaction, medical attendants are key experts, and mothers rely on their interventions to ensure safe birth. Held hostage by fear and misinformation, mothers' sacred bodies are labeled through pathologies of dysfunction and ill-prepared, strapped to machines that limit movement and induce fear, monitored and given medications that interfere with the hormonal oxytocin flow of love and inner attention so needed by mothers giving birth. Babies are then often surgically removed in too high statistics beyond this life-saving advance. Mothers literally pay for this with money and with agency, integrity, womb sovereignty, and pleasure. The loss of sacred self-authorization is the trade-off in a market system of birth where ultimate authority and knowledge is redirected higher up to those paid to hold accountability. The suffering this causes mothers is finally being identified in the literature of birth trauma, which is now endorsed by the World Health Organization and documented in systematic practices of obstetric violence, as Elena Skoko has also shared with us in these salons. There may be caring people within this system who recognize and seek to circumvent its impacts, but the overall strategy is paternalistic authoritative management, with very little wiggle room for vulnerable birthing mothers once inside these echo chambers. Within medicalization, there's no internally robust, understood practice dynamics of the sacred feminine that can support the maternal wisdom tradition of the female body giving birth. In this patriarchal system, birth has been rewritten and transposed towards a monetized sacrificial act of female suffering. With no primary birthing goddesses to worship and adore, to lead the ritual procession into our birthing chambers, encircling mothers with love and attentive care, gently, fiercely holding and protecting primal birthing energies and ecstatic mother space. Literally and metaphorically, the sacred regenerative snakes have been banished from our lands, the mother goddesses of female power dismembered, their body parts strewn across continents, and the dragons are slayed. Yet the life-gifting energetics of Mother Earth live on. We can relight Mother Power and collect ourselves. Our hidden in plain sight, maternal wisdom tradition of birth is calling for us to feel embodied love and joy in this gift of life. Thus, through an embodied gift economy of birth, birthing bodies can access deep capacities to surrender into pleasure and relief. There may be pain, huge effort, and even fear, but this drop into feeling states claims the necessary sensual qualities of birth, where scent, touch, emotion, and all the deeply transformative inner and outer work of the mother to bring forth new life is her gifting work to experience. She will feel it. And once her child is born, she will know the strength of her inviolable self. It takes courage to do so. The dominant system may say you're wrong or incite fear, as birth gifting lives on that edge of life and death, on the hinge of women's primacy in this creative gifting act. And so birth writ large, with its deep philosophical mother powers and meanings, is being re-socialized as central to human experience, well-being, culture, and lifelong meaning-making. Birth is not meant as women's suffering of biblical proportions, but to be lived through supportive circles of caring celebration. Oxytocin, as the love and pleasure hormone present in all acts of human loving connection, is at a lifetime peak when giving birth. Dr. Sarah Buckley, who researches the benefits of physiologic birth, emphasizes how ecstasy, giving birth in ecstasy, is our birthright and our body's intent. Mother Nature, in her wisdom, prescribes birthing hormones that take us outside our usual state so that we can be transformed on every level as we enter motherhood. In being born, we arrive through our mother's bodies, stretching through her sacred vulva yoni, this goddess portal incised into ancient rock art worldwide, or as the sacred Sheela-na-gig of my Irish ancestors is carved in rock above ancient doorways, displaying her vulva as a portal reminder of whence we came and where we all go, through the mother. What if we knew love and joy as our birthright, literally at birth, where the bliss of new mothers and babies flows onwards from womb to society at large? And so placental roots. I set out on my birth-keeping path when I was a teenager in the late 1980s. After attending a home birth with midwives, I was awakened to a love of and trust in women's birthing powers and liberation. Along with midwifery, I later pursued my birth callings through women's spirituality and goddess studies, where I saw how culture and spirituality could be reinformed by birthing consciousness to shift from a traumatizing culture of patriarchy to a mother world that gestates and nourishes love. As I'd witnessed over and over how mothers thrived in their home birth experiences, giving birth under their own powers in caring circles of others. I understood the importance of this knowledge I'd been privy to and wanted to transmit what I'd learned from this maternal wisdom tradition towards larger circles of study. I wanted to theorize the significance of deeply female-based body parables towards philosophies of birth and life for thriving of all. And in this, the placenta patiently called out to me from the very first time I studied one with my midwife mentor. I remember seeing red, red, red blood, wondering how to make sense of this organ, and then beginning to discern shape and form, where there are two sides, a mother side and a baby side. The mother side has intersecting lobes, almost brain-like, which attaches to the inside wall of the mother's womb, connecting baby to mother's lifeblood. On the baby side, you see rooting veins that fan outwards, circular, from the umbilical cord in the placental mass. This side is very smooth and cosseted by the amniotic sac, which surrounds the baby in utero. To understand this, our favorite placenta, midwifery placenta metaphor was and is that of a tree, where the placental mass holds the roots, the cord is like a tree trunk, and the baby is the fruits and flowers on this human tree of life. Through placental roots, mothers gift life to their gestating babies in a unilateral gifting dialogue of blood nourishment. And in spending time in ancient coastal rainforests of the west coast of Canada, where I live, for some reason this brings tears, I've observed huge upturned trees after storms, their roots splayed out like giant placentas of Mother Earth. So in expanding the metaphor of the placenta as tree, I saw we embody the actual morphologies of trees through our placentas, where tree roots reach into the earth mother, just as we reach for nourishment into the bodies of our mothers through the root-like veins of the placenta, a synchronicity of forms where oxygen and nutrients are transported from mother to child or from earth to green fronds of the tree and back again, in a continual dialogue of love and respiration, where life's regenerative gift is held and offered by mother. I understand this gift morphology as a physical and spiritual articulation of our deep interconnection to trees and all living systems on Mother Earth, ritualized through our earliest bodied gestation in mother. Thus, honoring the placenta's gifting morphology in the home birth practices I worked in, mothers had immediate and ongoing access to their placentas, where families often chose to bury their baby's placenta in the earth under a tree, giving thanks to Mother Earth. Another use that I learned was to prepare and feed the mother placenta post-birth, as placentas are rich with hormones and nutrients that can nourish physical and emotional well-being, just as many mammals consume this after birth. There's also a now more well-known practice of drying and encapsulating placentas so that mothers have access to placenta power in the demanding months of early motherhood. I thus learned of placenta as mother-baby helpmate, a meta-mother being who's capable of gifting healing beyond the womb, so that every time families reclaim placentas, acknowledging through ceremony or preparations its gifting role, its role in gifting life, a larger connection to the mother world and the Mother Earth community is made, where sacred connection between earth and birth is restored. The gift of mother is known. We cannot deny her ultimate reality from placenta roots. A little bit more here. So in contrast, the medical practice of throwing out placentas becomes an amplified metaphor of our social detachment from the maternal gift of life as being literally worthless. This is especially so in the context of mothers not knowing about or having access to their baby's placentas post-birth if wanted. The association of birth blood as refuse, or what is refused, seems related to taboos and shame associated with menstrual blood in modernized industrial market economies. Rather than honoring the sacred function of the female body's life-giving powers, there's a preference for media displays of death blood, amplified in lived realities of human violence and war. In contrast, the mother blood of life and birth can be reclaimed and celebrated for its primal creative powers. Additionally of note are the mother-baby separation rituals of medicalized birth, where babies are too quickly taken and handled by attendants like extracted resources, severing mother connection. Early umbilical cord clamping, while cutting the cord and removing baby from mother at the moment of birth, completely disrupts the primal intimate process of mother-baby bonding and the mother's own oxytocin love-based peak experience of relief and pleasure. Rather, keeping the umbilical cord intact means baby is attached to mother where they belong, where mother can hold, touch, feel, see, smell, and talk to her newborn. This allows a full placental transfusion so that the baby's blood is completely returned to their own body from the placenta and cord where it had been circulating. And this takes time. The mother-baby dyad explore each other post-birth, giving the placenta its direct hormonal signal to be born through the sensuality of mother-baby skin-to-skin touch. So protecting the sensual nature of birth surely grows from the wisdom of placental roots. Additionally, directing kind, respectful, compassionate attunement towards birthing mothers is a component of placental roots for nourishing a maternal gift economy of birth. A common philosophy and practice of midwives and doulas, birth attendants everywhere could adopt this caring attitude with the ability to focus on and empathize with mothers at the center. In a diagrammatic perspective of care, this looks like a circle or spiral where motherers, as Jen Vaughan writes of, support the birthing mother as needed. Within this holistic birthing spiral, the mother retains her own energies and agency for birth, physical and psychic, for herself and her baby. She has the birth power. She is the birth power with her baby. And when baby is born into mother's arms, a palpable feeling of darshan, of blessing, of grace arrives, touching all. So in forwarding placental roots for nourishing an embodied gift economy of birth, I uphold mother-centered birth for nurturing the earliest gifting bonds of love between mother and child. Bliss and attachment then flow onwards towards children as they grow through further gifts of maternal care. And ideally, the social milieu as a gift economy supports maternal birth gifting through all kinds of cooperative gifting networks of care that put mothers and children at the center. This will lead to more peaceful, cooperative, nurturing societies where humans develop their full potentials as relational beings with gifts to share, because how babies are born matters, as do the ways mothers are treated and experience themselves at this time of life. So can we recognize, educate, and reroute ourselves through the gift-centered relationships as the placenta teaches us? I feel gratitude towards the humble placenta while beholding its nourishing roots of life that gestate the earliest gifts of mothering. I honor this sacred gift of life and reclaim a maternal gift economy of birth from our collective placental roots on Mother Earth. So thank you all. I'm going to shift into my PowerPoint with some pictures, which is, let's do our share screen. There, I think we're seeing it. Are you seeing it? Yes, yay. That's just a nice pic of the book, which has just got so many amazing stories and also research and things around the placenta in it. And this is beautiful placenta art on the cover by Jody Sellender, who worked for many years supporting women with placenta encapsulation and spreading great education around mother healing with the placenta. Going here to, this is actually, I just put this here. This is an old time circle where we do a blessing for a mother before there's my friend there with her belly about to have a baby in about a month or so, and we do a blessing ceremony for women. And I just thought that's the idea of this circle. So the mother, well, she's in the circle with us. And then at the birth, we're around her. She's at the center. Oh, now I've lost my, I better. Okay, so there's our mother blessing circle. And then there's one of these yoni Neolithic, it's a picture from Maria Gimbutas's work, Language of the Goddess, but it's just this frog-like yoni being showing that birth portal and that beautiful open goddess legs. And there's another friend in her labor. I just wanted to show this kind of mother-centered care where she's in her birth trance, resting between contractions. And then I didn't want to show too many birth pictures because just for people's confidentiality, but my daughter, when she was about 6, drew this, who has been raised alongside birth and placentas. And if you can see this picture, you'll see there's a mother, she's actually in a water tub because we used to do a lot of water births at home. And so there's, and it's just so sweet because Shanti just totally embodied this. There's the mother with her necklaces giving birth and the midwife with another little girl there beside her. And I just thought that was so cute. There's someone with their dog. So it's a circle of women around this birthing mother. And this is a picture of a newborn baby. He's just been born. I just wanted to show this because he did not cry, serene. His placenta, his cord is intact. Mom hasn't even given birth to the placenta yet. This is the kind of scene, you know, I would want to promote in terms of the baby has had a gentle, normal birth. Mom is gazing at her baby. It's just a beautiful love moment. And you can see the cord is, no one's touching that cord, no one's clamping it, and no one's taking baby from mom. So, and this is just to show the, you can see this is again an unclamped cord where the placenta has been born without any cutting or clamping. So you can see the baby and the placenta just right after birth. And here are placenta pictures. So this is the baby side of a placenta, as I was talking about, really looking like tree roots in the earth. And it's the side that the baby would be right in contact with as they're growing in mama's womb. It's really like a pillow of the baby, and the baby has got that heartbeat of mother also pulsing through the placenta, because that's where the through circulation of everything baby needs comes through the placenta. And this is the mother side. And I think there's, you know, I think that it's a brain, because it is doing that work of it's doing, I mean, I've talked about something I call placental thinking, but I think that there's a certain kind of agency of this organ that's making all of the calculations of what's needed for everybody, you know, for that baby. So, and there's a tree, just so that, you know, to be really clear about that structure of the tree. Whoops, I want to go back. Sorry, there's another placenta, but just here was the next image is a picture of a tree again, where you really see that connection. It's just so beautiful. And that's actually, I was up at a birth and helping a mom with her placenta after the birth. So the dad took that picture for me. Again, it's a beautiful showing that side of, that's the baby side, and where you can see there's some amniotic, the sac materials over my hand, which come up around. And this is a placenta print that we would make at a birth. It's not, there's so many more. I have a friend, a doula friend here, Karina the doula, who does beautiful placenta artwork. This is a very basic placenta print for mom. And that's the baby side where you see a little bit more of the root. So we're making actually a print with the blood print of the placenta. And that's a cord. I didn't talk about it in the paper, but cord drying, we can keep the cord for the baby in different traditions. There's traditions of keeping the cord or burying the cord. But that's a cord. I often put them in a spiral for mothers. And that little stump, that's actually, I don't know why that little piece is there, because that wouldn't be. And this is some placenta art of my own. I made a series I called the Placenta Project, kind of felted placentas. And just showing that connection, I kind of thought of them as antenna for talking to Mother Earth through our placentas. So I put them around into trees as an installation, also near the water to show our connection between tree and water, and that there really is this wisdom of our interconnection with Mother Earth. And again, this is Toronto, which is sort of my placental home because I was born in Toronto, but I live now on the West Coast. And then just some kind of rooting along the water line of Lake Ontario. Thinking again, too, about that connection with Mother Earth and the placenta in the water. Yeah, so that's, and then I think I have one more. Yes, this is also Shanti, my daughter's artwork. She made this for me as a birthday card. Can you see what she did?
Mhm.
She has the placenta. This is Shanti's vision. It's so beautiful. And I grow sunflowers every year for our co-op. So she's showing me with the sunflower heart, which is just such a, and then this, you know, it's like our aura, the placenta, what do you call that? The halo, and then the cord going around. So anyway, I just love that. Such a beautiful representation. And then the hand has the eye, the healing hand. So thank you. I'm really happy to have shared that with you all. And thanks, Letecia.
Nané, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much for that presentation and those images and for sharing your artwork. What a gift that your daughter had growing up around the circle of life, that she got to see it her whole lifetime and not have to be afraid to grow up to be a woman. You know, that is just amazing. Those transitions and changes that she gets to see firsthand. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Darsha, who's going to take off where Nané left us with the child being born into the world. So Darsha Navarras is a professor emerita of psychology at the University of Notre Dame, fellow of the American Psychological Association and the American Educational Research Association. She employs a lifespan interdisciplinary approach to studying evolved morality, child development, and flourishing. She blogs for Psychology Today at Moral Landscapes, and she hosts the webpage evolvednest.org. She is also the author of many books, and I hope that she'll tell you about her most recent one before she opens us up to questions. So please welcome Darsha, who's going to be talking to us about the companionship care through the Evolved Nest Shape Children's Humanity.
Thank you so
welcome.
much. Thank you, Letecia, and thank you, Jen, and thank you, Diane, and everyone who's making this possible. My heart and spirit are soaring from Nané's presentation. It's so beautiful. Inspiring. Talk about interdisciplinary, right? With the art and the displays on the land and the trees. Love it. So thank you so much. I'm coming from more of a scientific perspective, hopefully not too dull. But let me share my screen here. Wait a second.
Nané, you're never dull.
Nané, never dull. But maybe.
No, and neither Darsha. Darsha is never dull.
Well, okay. Am I screen sharing now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So I'm starting my thing here. So I've had multiple careers, and my kind of core umbilical cord through my life has been children's well-being. And that's my first memory in life was despair over a child's mistreatment. And then throughout childhood, living outside the United States, having seeing kids my age who are not in school or who are on the streets trying to earn money, you know, for their food and the poverty and so on. And so, and it's just took me a while to get to my PhD in psychology, educational psychology, moral development. And then more after that, it took me a while to get to realize what I now call the evolved nest here. When the United States went to war in Iraq, it just shocked me that it could be so easily done with flimsy, you know, I mean, and the war on terror and all the, I couldn't figure it out. So I then was given the insight really of the evolved nest and how that's related to moral development. So I'm going to say a little bit today. There's tons to say, but I didn't want to make it too long. So just to clarify now, this is early child development. So after birth, we're talking about here, we're really still like fetuses for 18 months. We don't resemble the fetuses of other animals. We can't walk around and feed ourselves, for example, or our skulls are not fused until around that age because the brain is expecting to grow hugely. It's only got 25% of the adult brain volume at birth, full-term birth. That's 40 to 42 weeks. Most kids now are not born at that age. They're born earlier for all sorts of reasons. And so a lot of the brain volume is growing rapidly after birth, especially the right brain. In the right hemisphere, the right brain is the seat of our self-regulation, our empathy, our capacity to relate to others flexibly, our sense of higher consciousness. And what also is happening in those first years is the immune system takes about 6 years to grow to adult levels, which means in some analyses that breastfeeding should really last that long because the breast milk is providing the immunological mechanisms the child doesn't yet have, him or herself. In those first years too, we are developmentally plastic. All sorts of systems are going through sensitive periods of setting up how they're going to work and function, what their parameters will be, what triggers them, for example, how easily, and our genes are getting turned on and off. And some of those things, there are sensitive periods for also, such as for controlling anxiety. So there's a lot of scientific stuff behind what I'm saying. I could go on and on about each of these things with examples. So you can ask questions, maybe if you want more information about something in particular. So what happens then in the early life in particular, because that's when we're most plastic and developing most rapidly, systems that will then establish themselves after age 6, where it's much harder to change things, although there still is in early adolescence and other time periods in life. But so caregivers are co-constructing the brain, the psyche, the body, how well it's going to work. And so I'm still talking post-birth, of course, a lot happens during pregnancy in the womb. But we have our birth brain is ready to be conditioned. We're kind of in a hypnotic state in the first years of life. And so all our experiences are kind of hypnotizing us as to how to be, as well as all the physiological, actual biochemical and integrative systems and how they're going to work. And a lot has to still, as I say, develop. And one of the things in the early years is it includes the prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of our executive functions, what we call our decision-making capacities, our ability to stop and start actions, our ability to empathize really fully with others. It's got its first layers being laid down in the first year of life. So if you're under cared for, which I call not having the evolved nest, it's likely that's not going to be well developed. So you'll have trouble later with self-control and planning and organizing your life, for example. And as we all know, caregivers are co-constructing the child's body and brain through the physical presence and touch and how they relate to the child physically, but also that social, the mind melding that's expected at birth, right? That we have to resonate with others. That's how we regulate. We learn to co-regulate. We need it all throughout life to co-regulate with others. And so the pandemic has really made that difficult. A lot of people have become quite distressed without having people around to help them co-regulate. So what's happening in early life then is babies really need an exterogestation. That means a womb with a view, according to Ashley Montague. That's how he called it. Meaning that everything should be like the womb, except you get to see. You're in the arms of your caregivers, carried around all the time. And it's just now, but your needs should be met quickly, just as in the womb they were. So breastfeeding on request, touch and movement, and just keeping babies calm, really important for the development of all these systems, because there's a constant interaction between nature and nurture. So every 5 minutes, that's a different baby, because they've grown thousands of synapses, connections in the brain in those 5 minutes, right? Assuming that they're being nurtured appropriately. And so you can't tease out what's affecting what, nature versus nurture. And as I said, there are epigenetic effects. That means genes are being turned on or off for all systems. And we're really biosocial creatures. That means our biology is shaped by our social experience. And then our social capacities are influenced highly by how well our biology was shaped by the social experience we had. So in that co-construction, emotions and cognition are being grown from the early moments of life and on. And our view of ourselves, the implicit self means it's subconscious. We don't really remember our earliest months and years of life because our brain hasn't developed the verbal orientation and everything's not connected yet. But we have a sense, we have it in our body. So we remember, our body remembers. It's just that our conscious mind may not. And that sense of self, our social self, how to be in the world, how to treat others based on how we're treated, is going to be carried forward then and flavors our life. So it's really important to have that loving, nested relationships of experience, so that you build an implicit sense of self, of being good, of being loved, of being wanted, of being in a lovable world, and being able to love others yourself from experience that you've had as a young child. So here's the evolved nest. I could speak for hours on this, but I only have the one page. So you see there are 9 components that we study. And these are, I came up with this list based on what the anthropologists, ethnographers have noted all over the world are common practices in hunter-gatherer societies and other traditional societies. But the hunter-gatherer societies that represent our history, most of our history, at least for the last, well, we've been around for 6 million years, the human genus has. Our Homo sapiens have been around for 2 million years. And we know that the Bushmen of Southern Africa have been around for 200,000 years. So the most of these are represented in the Bushmen, because that's 95% of our history as a Homo sapiens. So, so you can see there are 9. Number 1, soothing perinatal experiences. That includes the gestational experience of the child, which then, of course, depends on the support the mother has. The mother has to be supported by the community in order for her to relax into being present to her child. And this is throughout life of the child too. But soothing perinatal means that it's happening from the beginning and at birth, the soothing birth and the wonderful, loving, welcoming that the baby receives that Nané was talking about. That's what we're talking about here. And no separation of mom and baby, no painful procedures after birth, no circumcision. Those kinds of things are all represented here, number one. Each of these components now we have neuroscientific support for, as well as the ethnographic. We have clinical evidence that they're important as well. So things go wrong when they're not provided, for example. So number two is on request breastfeeding. And as I mentioned earlier, the various biological analyses, Catherine Detweiler in particular has done, suggests that we really should be breastfeeding for 6 years. So to say that breastfeeding for a long time is at a year, when someone does it for a year is long, well, not really. So this is also a shocking thing, right, for modern industrialized market economies, particularly the USA, where mothers are not supported. But breast milk, of course, is tailored to the needs of the child, boy, girl, different milk, infectious agent in the region. The mother produces an antibody for that. And every time the breast milk is different based on what mom has been eating. And so the baby's palate gets trained up by the breast milk. And we could say a lot more, but I'll go on. Number three, positive moving touch, and no negative touch. So a lot of caring and rocking and being skin to skin, and no negative touch. Unfortunately, in the United States, half of parents say they spank their 12-month-old children. And their long-term effects now, the researchers on spanking suggest it has the same effect as physical abuse over the long term. Parents think it works because the child stops doing whatever it is at the moment, but the long-term effects are not good for the relationship, for the child's self-confidence, for their cooperation. They become more aggressive, and so on. Number four is positive climate. That's a welcoming climate. The child's embedded in a social climate that is soothing, serene, joyful. This is what we see in Bushman societies. They spend a lot of time enjoying one another, and they have all sorts of kind of rituals to make sure they're connecting all the time. And we know that this is really important for, again, keeping the biochemistry in a positive state when children are growing so rapidly. It's very important. Instead of having a climate where you feel it's angry or fearful or dread filled. Number five, self-directed social play. This is important for all mammals. When young mammals are feeling good and well, they will play. And it's the best way to learn. Children should be playing throughout childhood till age 12 or longer. That's should be their primary form of learning, and not sitting down and learning to do things through worksheets or whatever, to be still. That is a crazy way to grow a child. So lots to say about that too. Allo mothers or allo parents, other nurturers, really critical. That's how we evolved to have such big brains, to be so socially oriented. Our species is because we had help. Moms can't do it by themselves to raise this very needy child who's got the big brain, who needs a lot of calories. And grandmothers help especially, but also in our ancestral context, the anthropologists I'm learning, women formed coalitions to essentially control the alpha males so that they would have to get, I can say more about this later, I'm kind of new at it though, so that they would get the meat that was needed for the babies to eat, to the young children to eat, so that they would subsist and grow and thrive. And anyway, so we have evolved to have women in charge, essentially, to make sure that the community is well fed, that the alpha, the big egos are under control. Number seven, responsive relationships. That's I'll talk about that more in a moment, so I'll skip that one for now. And then nature connection, so immersion in the natural world, wherever you are, the child learns to feel connected to this tree and these animals and these plants, and to respect them, and to feel safe in the environment. This is just normal for animals generally. And then healing practices, routine healing practices. The Bushman, John Young works with, he asked them, how often do you have ceremonies for healing? And well, let's see, for grief, maybe a couple times a week. So they have ceremonies for healing, for rebalancing when someone's relationships are out of balance, for getting back into nature connection, on and on. So the ceremony is really important. Native Americans also tell us this, how important it is to actually, your day is filled with ceremony and gratitude. Every time you take a drink of water or you fill your glass, you're saying thank you to the universe for providing everything that you need. So these are, the nest is what every animal has a nest. Ours is over now they're saying maybe 300 million years old, but at least 75 million years old, these characteristics, most of them. It's really evolution's experiment. And again, to emphasize, it's provisioned by a community, not just mom and dad. So let me just say a little more about responsiveness. That is called Good Enough Mothering by D.W. Winnicott, a psychotherapist. He said, good enough mothers provide a holding environment for the child's rapid psychosocial growth. And so the child feels secure, safe, connected, and calm. And especially babyhood, really important when that brain is growing so rapidly. And the mother is able to preoccupy herself with the needs of the child, to identify with the infant physically and mentally, and then receive wholeheartedly the spirit and heart of the child. And this, of course, takes community support. Does the pregnant mother feel supported? Is the mother nested in the way that I was saying? Let me just go back to the nest. All these components, except for the first two, we all need throughout life, right? This is what we see in our ancestral context. We're all provided with mentors, with a positive climate, with touch and play, responsiveness and connection and healing, nature connection. And so that means the mother needs those things too in order for her to devote herself to the child. Is the child welcomed by the community? And are the mother's and child's basic needs met? This is what our community heritage, what Sarah Hurdy calls cooperative breeding, our heritage is. That's how we got here. And let me just say what thriving looks like, because I think we forget, when we're provided with the nest, when we're provided with that support, when our mothers are able to focus on our needs and devote themselves to our well-being, especially in those early years, this is what results. And it also, of course, is supported by ongoing nestedness. So thriving individuals have quiet minds, inner happiness, childlike glee. They're vital and fully alive. They're autonomous. They make their own decisions, and they're free to do that. They're honest and authentic. Have a sense of humor that's not hostile. Have outstanding memory and senses and build habits of will. And they have know-how for getting along in the particular ecological landscape so they don't damage it. And they have an ecological attachment to it. So it's a relational respect for nature. And they're connected to spirit. So awareness of reality beyond the manifest is really part of that. And they thrive in relationships. So on the right side, they enjoy being with others, enhance their well-being. They're relationally attuned and responsive. They give empathy, listen unconditionally. They're communally oriented, authentically helpful, unconditionally love and forgive others. They're generous and egalitarian. They don't coerce anyone, not even children. And there's respect for ancestors, but also future generations with a responsibility toward the web of life. Now, in the United States, when I look around, I don't see much of this going on. I mean, there's pockets here and there, but overall, we've set up an unnested society, right? And we have distressed people and stressed them out so much, it's really hard to get to thriving. So part of the responsiveness is I, thou versus I, it relationships. This is Martin Buber's term. In an I, thou relationship, you are recognized for your uniqueness, all of you is taken in, your beauty, your energy, your form, and you feel like you matter. You're noticed, you're cared about, you're invested in. And people who are in high value relationships are present to one another emotionally and mentally, attentionally. And it's really the common experience in our ancestral context, very powerful bonding activity. On contrast, the I-it relationship, you are categorized according to some particular characteristic. Others separate out, identify, and abstract your contents. You're objectified, and then you're used instrumentally for their ends, right? So this is what Buber was pointing out, that our world has shifted to the right side. Now, when we treat babies as thou, that means we're fostering attachment, we have a mutually responsive orientation, and I would say we provide the evolved nest. But we tend to treat, in the US, treat babies like its. We don't support parents, so parents can't be present to their children because they're worried about going to the third job or, paying the bills or whatever it is that we just load on people in this country. The caregivers then have to be, they feel that they are emotionally, physically distant. They put their babies into daycare at 6 weeks old or even 2 weeks old because they have to go back to work because they don't make enough money. So everyone has to work. Babies are categorized then as objects to be manipulated. They're not considered people, beings, unique beings. And unfortunately, parents are pushed to follow the cultural myths of parental control and teaching independence, so-called, which actually the opposite happens. When you force babies to sleep alone, sleep train them, put them on a schedule of feeding, you are now creating dependency forever. And the Nazis knew this in their child raising manuals. Yeah, you do this when they're babies, they won't remember why and how or what, but they can automatically succumb to your power plays because they go into a fear mode, their stress response kicks in, they have been conditioned to go into an obedient mode and shut down. And parents then are often told to fear spoiling babies. And so they treat babies like its. So unnestedness then leads to dysregulations of all kinds at every level. So stress response, immune system, endocrine system, oxytocin system isn't going to work so well. The vagus nerve runs through all the major systems of the body. All sorts of things get dysregulated, and it depends on exactly when the undercare happened, for which system was affected, or which system was affected most. And so we have a lot of ill health, mental ill health, anxiety, depression, anger, reactivity. We've got epidemics of these things in the United States. And physical ill health, epidemics of diabetes, heart disease, right? These things are seeded in babyhood because when a baby is toxically stressed, that means they're going into the stress mode. They're starting to cry, and even if they stop crying, because no one comes, they're still in the stress mode. Cortisol levels are high. They're wiping out brain connections. They're setting inflammation as a set point for the body. And so that's related to heart disease later. And then we also have social issues because people don't know how to get along because they didn't learn the things during sensitive periods in early life. And then I connect that to moral functioning. So when your stress response kicks in a lot, you're going to be oriented. It just necessarily changes your blood flow. You're going to be self-oriented because you don't feel safe. And when that happens, you're not going to think open-heartedly and open-mindedly. No, that's not going to happen. So you have a general disconnection from self, others, and community. Oh, and I said some of this already. So lots of development is undermined. And your psychology is going to be distrust of yourself, impaired sense of who you are. You learn to live against instead of with others, especially if you had to cry to get your needs met. You're going to become socially disagreeable, oppositional, or withdrawing from others because that's what the stress response leads you to do. And you just have a general distrust of others, anxiety, cynicism, and demonization, trying to find some way to feel better about yourself. So you have to demonize some other other group and identify with some group you think is better. You see this all over the states. So social opposition, social withdrawal, emotional dissociation. And let me just talk about this diagram. So in the middle, down at the bottom, when you come to every situation, and this is Stephen Porges's work with the vagus nerve and how that functions. In every situation, you immediately, very quickly, in milliseconds, decide whether you feel safe or not, safe or unsafe. If you feel unsafe in that situation, you move to the right side. You go into a defensive mode. You're mobilizing your fight flight, even at a minuscule level. You brace against the other, right? And if you've practiced this, it's conditioned in early life to go into being very demanding and trying to get everyone's attention. That's the fight flight thing. Or you get immobilized. You just sort of faint away and hide, and you're not yourself, and you're very compliant, because when you were a baby, no one ever showed up, and so you had to just shut down and get silent, or you die from using up all your energy. And you just are kind of a wallflower. So those are the options on the right side. Now, the other way to get to the right side is at the top of the diagram, a top-down shifting. This is where people have told you stories like, oh, green people are dangerous. Oh, they're dirty and yucky. Stay away from the green people. And then you see a green person, you go, oh my God. And you switch over to the right side, the unsafe side, right? So this side is really what trauma-informed practice is, which is becoming a widespread kind of informational orientation today. Trauma-informed means you understand these triggering patterns and you avoid triggering people in the workplace or at school. Now, on the left side, this is our heritage. This is where our ancestors and our cousins, our ancestral context people, they spend their time over here. They feel safe most of the time with people. They don't have all these triggers because they didn't get conditioned to have the triggers when they were young. And so they'll be mostly on the other side and approach others and be open to life. And what I call this, our wellness informed practices, leads us to emphasize these things, the nestedness that's really important for our human nature to express itself. So unfortunately, we are in this cycle of competitive detachment. We've got suffering at every level. It represents extreme social poverty. So you can see, number one, we undercare for our children, and developmentally inappropriate child raising leads to dysregulated psychosocial neurobiology, adults who are ill and have limited social neural capacities, and they create and continue to support a trauma-inducing culture where they're distracted, overwhelmed, neglectful, over-controlling, just out of balance. Now, our heritage is this, though, cycle of cooperative companionship. This is what we see in our ancestral context. Companionship care from conception builds a healthy psychosocial neurobiology, builds adults with well-being and even wisdom, and they continue to provide the basic needs of everyone in the community. And they do this with the earth in mind, so within an ecologically responsible way. So we can talk about how you intervene at each point as well. I'm going to skip this. And then I know my time is running. So the new book that's just out is the one on the left, Restoring the Kinship Worldview, with my colleague and wonderful man, 4 Arrows. And we take 28 precepts from the kinship worldview, the indigenous worldview. There's different terms for it. And then we talk about what that means and what does it look like and how do we apply it in our lives now. These are the ways that our ancestors survived, adapted, and thrived that we've forgotten. And so we're on our way down the precipice if we don't shift back, in our view. And then the book on the right is what we created from a conference we had, we co-hosted a few years ago. Thank you, I better stop. Lots more tools here at evolveness.org. You can see kindredmedia.org. Please watch the film if you haven't, breakingthecyclefilm.org. I could put a link in the chat in a moment. And there's a lot of other things. Please email if you have any questions. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, and there's our movie. Yeah. Go to stop the sharing. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darsha. That was fabulous. And just a perfect segue into life and Nané's deep connection to the earth through the placenta and that whole progression of the mother being at the center. And of course, we celebrate this weekend as Mother Earth or Earth Day. So thank you both for those wonderful presentations. Before we open up to questions to the group, I'm wondering, Jen, did you have any comments or anything that you'd like to share at this moment?
Well, yes. First, I just want to thank you both for these beautiful presentations, and they're so important in this time of when the world situation is so really opposed to the whole system of values that you're talking about. And but we can change, and we can get back to those values, I think. And it's just thinking about how patriarchy has just made mothering and the whole birthing and issue of invisible. That is what we haven't been able to access it, even though half of humanity, women, have the capacity to birth. And so many of us actually do, and that everybody is born from a mother. And so women have that experience, and that experience has been canceled in a way by the market and by patriarchy. And so our focus has been on something other than the giving of life and the receiving of life, and the community as the social womb, let's say. So it's just so, let's say shocking that this information that's so important, this point of view that's so important, has been made invisible for so long.
Thank you, Jen. Darsha and Nané, do either of you, would you like to respond to Jen?
Yeah, I also just wanted to thank Darsha, because Darsha, your science, you have brought together kind of just exactly what we need from a scientific and psychological, and so the whole perspective of into, like, I've always drawn from your work in terms of just having that articulated at that level that you do. So I just wanted to say I really appreciate your work, and I think it's great that we just got paired together today for this, because I think it just brings the depth out of the whole issue and what Jen just said. And I just feel like, Jen, it's not that it's sort of like a hidden in plain sight thing, right? I think I use that, even hidden in plain sight. And this is the first time this paper, what came through this time for me is I just said this thing called the maternal wisdom tradition of birth. I've never written that. I've written so many articles. I was going to say for listeners, your book, Jen, that we put together, I have a paper in there. I have a paper here that's basically everything I just shared with everybody, but more. I have the book, Placenta Wit, but I think that what came out in writing this little piece was this, who said that? That was like just gifted to me to say that from that kind of spirit of birth. There is this maternal wisdom tradition, and what Darsha just laid out for us, like, this is our heritage. Our bodies this is what has been, I don't know, like what happened in the last, I guess, 500 years, but or, you know, with colonization. And anyway, the whole process that we're talking about, but it's there, it's still there. So I think that's the hope. And I think when I'm sort of directing people to like midwifery or doulas or free birth, I'm really interested in, I was just telling Letecia before we jumped into the Zoom about the Free Birth Society women who are claiming birth really outside of all kinds of systems, even midwifery, where we've had issues with midwifery being, you know, being, I guess, co-opted or medicalized, or, you know, it's so easy to get steamrolled, Jen, I think what you're talking about, because it just, because that's what's been going on. So we
Yeah.
kind of have to fight for it. I mean, not fight and love. Like, I'm just always like, can we hold that? Can we just be?
Yeah.
I don't even love to spend too much time in the critique, though I know we need to. I love to spend time in the world that's already here in a way, but kind of nourishing that. I guess that's the idea of the placental roots, is that we can nourish this this paradigm that's kind of old and new and all at once, right?
Yes. Beautiful. Darsha, do you have anything that you'd like to respond to this little piece right here?
I think we've got a lot of trauma that's been passed down generation to generation, and people have just lost their sense of alternatives because they've been beaten down so much. It's too scary to think about something different. And so they grab onto the whatever the hierarchical, patriarchal system as a way to feel safer somehow. So it's the challenge I find is to expand people's imagination. By the way, I just got kicked off of Psychology Today as a blogger.
Oh my gosh.
Because they in the last few years, they got taken over by a conservative group, and then they started reviewing everyone's posts before they would publish them. And so the one that they kicked me out right after I tried to get this one posted was how long should breastfeeding last? So I was going through Detweiler's analysis about that. And these are very unfriendly. Psychology Today has gotten very super pop oriented and not oriented to flourishing or babies or anything. So I think, and I find that's common with women in power positions, don't want to hear, not everybody, but I've had people shut me down. They don't want to hear about the evolved nest. They don't want to hear about breastfeeding. I've been yelled at at conferences. Even a philosopher from Germany said, "I don't want to have to touch my children. Well, you're a Nazi."
Oh dear. Oh my goodness.
So the world is all kind of all messed up, right? And they can't think straight, and they're not in their heart, right? They're disconnected from their hearts, and they can't perceive this.
Yeah, gosh.
Yeah, it's such a challenging time to be in. Nané brings up a really important point, like how do we stay rather than fighting? How do we actually thrive? How do we live and thrive this whole philosophy? And I think, Darsha, your website provides those of us who may have not had all the benefits of those 9 elements. There are exercises and other things that we can approach, how we can actually begin to thrive even with not having been raised in that particular way. Is that correct?
That's right. So we are trying to come up with tools, also a curriculum for high school students, a way to, we have analysis of daycare centers, preschools to see how much they conform to the evolved nest and what they can do. So we're trying to provide ways, little ins, right, to try to help adults, help children, help the world, change their orientation. Yeah.
And I think that we have a generational interest right now. And there isn't a single solution because
no.
each age group has its own developmental need.
Yeah.
And we need to be, to me, that's part of the wisdom reclaiming, that we need to recognize each generational grouping may have different needs because developmentally they need to address people who are working have certain needs. They can't just back out effectively, especially if you have children. So Jen, yes, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say we really need a paradigm shift, a different way of thinking, because we don't have time to just do this little by little as it would have been right to do. We have to think differently in order to keep the world from totally being destroyed by all of our awful polluting market things and about and wars, patriarchal wars, and
Yeah.
so we don't have time to do it so slowly. If we need to be able to have a paradigm shift, and then maybe, if possible, do it slowly.
Well, I think every person has to do it in themselves. That paradigm shift has to happen internally.
Yeah.
And then when every person does it, then it happens quite quickly. But the idea is that each person has to actually make a commitment of change, which is not an easy thing. Most people want, they're keyed to the outside. Somebody has to give it to me, where that's unfortunately the market has trained us to look outside. I'm wondering, perhaps, is this a good time to check to see if there are questions from the outside, from the group? Liliana.
Yes, I have a question for both of the speakers from Mary B. So it was sent to me by an email, and it's for both of the speakers. Why do you think that in this patriarchal society, there's such a contempt and lack of understanding for the miracle of birth, lack of respect of the placenta, as you said, that they throw away the placentas once the baby is born, breastfeeding? Do you think it's ignorance or misogyny?
I think it's trauma. They were traumatized at birth themselves. They were disconnected from their mothers. They were treated like its, and they don't want to go back there. They've shut it down. They've numbed it out, and then they react. They're acting against knowing that, and they say things like, "Well, I was spanked and I'm fine." I hear that. So it's like just a disconnection. It's this widespread disconnection from heart, from memory, from relationships, everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really like a historical progression, right? Like, I know in what I was sharing today, I was just trying to bring out some kind of edges around that. This is both really micro practices as well as like what we're thinking about and trying to shift in with the maternal gift economy, very big macro philosophies. Like when we have really literally lost goddesses, we don't have a birthing, creator being that is an example that, or we've lost, not in specifically in indigenous cultures, although there's the colonization history, but this connection to Mother Earth, which, we wouldn't be throwing out placentas because it would be so obvious. That's, yeah, kind of what I, and when I was learning midwifery in the, way back even in the 80s, right? And the whole midwifery movement was coming, the lay midwives, and I was a, very young woman in my 20s, and I was studying with sort of the baby boomer generation who'd been fighting to bring back midwifery and the women who were reclaiming birth. People didn't, the placentas were there. I think people maybe were learning about them as we went along, right? So it was like, okay, here's the placenta. And then you start to like study it and think about it. And of course, you know, there might be very even little probably scientific work on it. Now, of course, placentas are studied in science for their stem cells. So we didn't talk about this in the paper, but the market might throw out a placenta, but it also wants it for research because now, you know, whoa, these things are packed. You know, the way Darsha was telling us about the baby's brain, you know, that's a new baby every 10 minutes. Well, that placenta, man, that got you from being like a speck to a little thing we can hold in our arms in 9 months. And that was the placenta doing that with these stem cells, they're called, right? Which turn out to be like, that's why I think when mothers or mammals consume placenta, they're getting a lot of regenerative support. So there's, you know, so what is the value of something, right? If the market finds out about that, and then, you know, keeping cord blood from babies too is another, you know, using this in cancer. I mean, not to say that we shouldn't be investigating these beautiful things about the placenta, because that is the gift of the placenta. But yeah, I think there's just been a huge disconnect from birth. And it is something Letecia just said, something we looking outside ourselves. And that's part of what's happened, is kind of losing touch with actually we give birth, like female bodied beings, mothers. As much as we might want someone else to do it for us, and maybe, you know, that's part of this dynamic of handing it to an expert, but it really is that we have to do it. It's like pretty hard and overwhelming, but the beautiful thing of it is we're designed in a way that if we get the kinds of support we need and are able to go internally, like it generally works out really well, and you're actually gifted a whole bunch of wonderful stuff around being able to birth your baby and welcome your baby. And when that's undisturbed or supported or loved, there's just such an amazing, just that leads into it. The other thing I just want to share quickly is that the breast is like an external placenta. So when we are born, we have that placenta that comes out, but then we move on to our mother's breast. And the breast is also, you know, a nipple with all these beautiful rooting. So just to make another morphology, morphology, as the breastfeeding is this kind of external placental gifting morphology that goes on, again, part of this maternal wisdom tradition of the gift and the gift economy.
That's such a beautiful visual. Darsha, yes.
Another response, what's happened in the last, especially a few hundred years, is the takeover of the Western society by the left hemisphere. If you know Ian McGilchrist's work, and I'll put his name in the chat. Now, we know that as I mentioned briefly in my talk, the right hemisphere is supposed to grow. It grows more rapidly in early life, but it needs the support system for that. And what we've done is we've undermined that support system. So we have adults with underdeveloped right hemispheres. And Dan Siegel, the therapist, talks about couples coming into his practice after they have their children have gone off and left the home, and the woman is ready to go, you know, meet the world, and the guy just wants to stay in his man cave. And he says this is the underdeveloped right hemisphere. You know, all this early experience affects boys more than girls. I should have said that, because they have less built-in resilience. They take longer to mature, so boys need more of it. So he's got these guys coming in, and they don't want to do anything. They're just kind of, you know, frozen. And so what he tells them to do is to go learn to ballroom dance, go learn to do art, do stuff that pulls you out in the moment. And what I recommend is for right brain development is play with a young child, go be silly with your partner and dance and do all this stuff in the moment, because in the moment your right hemisphere has to work at it. And then you crack open the empathy, your ability to connect and so on. It takes some time maybe. And so McGilchrist is saying the left brain took over the Western hemisphere, and that's why we're destroying the planet, because the left brain thinks it knows everything, doesn't know very much. but that's intellect, which all the major religions of the world have said is dangerous. You stay very long in it because you start to think it's true, and that's all there is. And that's where we are. We've got all these people, plus we have all these dysregulated people who are just, having tantrums to have control. So we got that two things going on, the survival system, people, and you got the little intellects that are detached from their relationships. So they're missing the heart again, the heart mind, the most important part of our being a human being.
Thanks, Darsha. Jen, you're making lots of notes and comments. Did you have anything you want to share with the group
No,
before
I
we go
just-
to the next question?
No, I'm just agreeing and thinking what y'all are saying is so illuminating and wonderful. So thank you.
Yes, I think it's so important. We've had a lot of activity in the chat, and I want you to know, so you don't feel pressured to have to read everything and listen all at the same time. Number one, we're going to put the recording up, and it will also perhaps will also include the chat so that people will be able to see that, and you can read that also. So Judith, do you have a question perhaps for the group?
This is a question for Darsha. Could you say more about epigenetics, what it is, and more about how it's related to birthing and to development?
So I'm not a biologist or a neuroscientist, so I'll tell you my little bit that I know. There's a number of different types of epigenetics. So one type is methylation. There's a tag that gets put onto a gene and determines whether it's going to function a particular way or not. And so the most famous of the experiments on this set of experiments are done by Michael Meany and his colleagues, where they looked at rats and rat mothers. And if you have a high nurturing rat mother in the first 10 days of life, and that means a mother who licks you a lot. So for the equivalent for humans would be being carried. And 10 days for a rat is 6 months for a child. So it means carrying a child 6 months, pretty much all the time. You're with them all the time, not distressing them. So if you've got a high nurturing rat mother in those first 10 days, the genes that control anxiety are turned on. And that mother doesn't have to be your biological mother. It can be any mother that's nurturing. If you don't have that in those first 10 days, you don't have a nurturing mother, maybe you have it on day 11. But if you don't have it in the first 10 days, those genes never get turned on. It's a critical period, right, for that. And they said they could have looked at thousands of genes. They picked this one. And the only remedy is to take drugs. So epigenetics then is how genes are just a blueprint that you come in with. It's like a blueprint of a house. It doesn't build the house. It just sort of directs where things should go. But you have to have experience to build the house, to build the person, to get the genes to actually activate. Or you end up with all these problems we have, I think. So there's a lot of epigenetic kinds of things happening. And then people ask, well, how about I'm an adult and I had a terrible childhood. What do I do, right? Most of us didn't have great childhoods in the States anyway. And I think the remedies then are to try to reshape your genetic function. You have to realize also that genes are changing, turning on and off all day long. So when you go to bed, different genes are activated and different ones are turned off. When you get up in the morning, different ones. So when you learn a skill, you've got new genes operating. So there's a lot of plasticity that we have. And so getting into a environment that's nested is likely to turn on the good genes for you. Now, I always say you have to start with self-calming techniques. If you're socially anxious or you're just get too self-centered for whatever reason, then learn belly breathing, learn other ways of self-calming, get that vagus nerve to function and hum, sing. These are things that help the vagus nerve. Then learn to be socially engaged with others, enjoy being with them face to face. It's been hard for a few years now, right? But play is the best thing. Play with a little kid. With my students, we played folk song games, and the college students had to, we learned the hunting we will go, we'll catch a little fox and put him in a box, and then we'll let him go. And then you get this circle bigger and bigger, and people are having to look at each other, and they have to touch each other, and they're laughing, they're smiling. That's growing the right brain. That's getting them back connected. So things like that will get you at least to the place where you feel a little more on the earth, and go out in nature, and connect to nature. We have 28 days of eco attachment dance for that, to nudge you over there. I'll put that in the chat.
Beautiful. Thank you, Darsha.
Can I just add to that, Letecia, too?
Absolutely, please.
I just was thinking of, this other kind of stream, maybe alongside sort of Darsha's sharings and teachings, which is, we've had just such amazing, powerful social movements come in, in the 60s, and then Letecia and I were just sharing, maybe right now, there's sort of a retwigging. I'm thinking of like cosmological, spiritual forces. I'm thinking of our ancestors who can speak to us and through us. I know a lot of my own work is informed by direct practice with birth, but then remembering cellular memory of older times coming forward to be remade into something new. So I just wanted to acknowledge all those forces and beings that are here. We've talked about generational trauma, but I know something I've heard in the Indigenous community where I live and work here in the colonial name Vancouver. There's ancestral love. So there is all of this potential within us, because I did see something in the chat about trauma and healing. We didn't get all this. I didn't specifically get all this. Wasn't able to just offer it to my own children, except somehow, some way I was so called to, be in this birth tradition, to revive it, to learn about it, to live it, to really live it. And then I think back in the day, we used to talk about attachment parenting. That was kind of the philosophy that I was kind of drawn to. I did really long-term breastfeeding of both my daughters, and which came out of the birth, being supported by midwives and learning midwifery myself. So I think that, yeah, it's kind of like a struggle and a striving, but then you get there. Like, I've been on this healing journey too. It's a healing thing. It's not like yeah, I had a lot of trauma in my childhood that actually I'm having to work on more in my late 40s and 50s. And I think people tell me, other healers too, that it's because I got to a place finally where I could work on some of this stuff more, kind of a more safe place in my own life, after working to create so much safety in my life. So yeah, I just wanted to name all that too.
Thank you, Nané. I think it's important, again, to remember that we have to go through phases and certain times of our lives. When you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, postmenopausal, you have different ways of being in the world that, again, that Darsha brought out, specifically wisdom, and Nané, you have used that word. That is not a word that's used in academia, which is where people go for information and quote unquote the truth. So both of you are inviting us to engage your body, and an embodied truth will help guide you as a reflection in these chaotic times of where we can find these, what Jen talks about, these hidden things, the things that we don't see. We know is real. It is our nature, our truest nature. The maternal gift economy is the underlying ethic, value, and philosophy, the economy of what supports humans. Homo sapiens have been around for 2 million years, according to what Darsha told us, which means nobody had to have books. They didn't have doctors to actually birth children. For 2 million years, mothers have been giving birth. Please. It's, I'm mystified at, I don't understand. And there's many ways to do that because each mother lives in a different, climate, and her needs and her community needs are very specific to what that child will grow into. So, these are, I think, things that we have been trained not to trust, which is our truest nature of being a Homo sapien, for goodness sakes, or a Homo donon, would be a better term for that, So, yes. Liliana, do you have a question for us?
I do. Lori Amy is saying, a comment and a request for your reflections, Darsha and Nané. Coming from a place of extreme and sustained early childhood trauma, much of my life has been in the service of understanding and working through the effects of this. And my academic scholarship has chronicled this trajectory. What I find with the maternal gift economy movement is a space, the social womb, that is a help for the neural rescripting so necessary in my own living. So can you reflect more on this? For instance, placental roots, neuroception development later in life. Thank you.
Darsha or Nané, which would like to begin?
Well,
Not a small question.
Yeah, I just had a word pop into my head because I know I've used it before in the context of trauma healing and our gift economy community. I loved what she just said there about the social womb.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had the word remothering, and mothering ourselves in community, remothering ourselves. So I know in a lot of the practices, like through women's spirituality and my goddess work and my work with my Gestare, my women's art collective, a lot of practices, earth-based practices, but also of being mothered by other women, which means really this beautiful attuned attention for each other, giving attention, which is the gift. Jen teaches us that in her gift of the gift of language, right? So we're attentive gifts. And that is all things I think Darsha was just telling about, a whole bunch of practices, but just gifts of attention I'm discovering are really important to me. I hold a lot of attention for others in my life, my family. I really need high quality attention to be able to also offer that, sort of like the nonviolent communication. To give empathy, you need to be full up of empathy. So that evolved nesting of offering that gifting of attention. And this is the part when we talk about the co-regulation in trauma healing that's so helpful, that we can be deeply heard or witnessed. So that just, but I really love the idea of remothering, because I think that's what's going on in a lot of these adult relationships, somehow also recovering a sense of being mothered. Maybe we didn't have it developmentally, and then but experiencing it, being able to experience that in our adult lives.
Thanks, Nané. Darsha, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I did mention a few things about healing in adulthood. For neuroception, that triggering, if you have triggering, there's two things that come to mind. First is my colleague, Four Arrows. He has a method of self-hypnosis called cat fawn. I'll just typing that. If you Google that, hopefully you'll find one of his writings about it. It's also in our book, the new book. And he argues that we're we're always hypnotized, or we can always move in and out of being hypnotized. And right now, the patriarchal system has hypnotized us into the ways that it wants us to be. And I think it happens in those early years, right, to just condition us. And he has a method then for self-hypnosis that he calls cat fawn. So you can move out of that. You can become aware of how people are using words to manipulate you, and how you can actually use your fear to actually move into courage and say particular words to yourself. You know, you have he has some techniques for going through when you have a fearful response that you can think about, how to move through that and change your orientation. So I would recommend that. And the second thing is, you know, psilocybin, mushrooms, if we want to move fast. Because if you take those mushrooms, you get the feeling of being one, you know, with everything. And at least on average, I guess. But the thing, it wears off, right? After 2 weeks, 2 months, people then go back to what they were doing before. So anyway, whatever works, right? And whatever we could do, multiple methods of getting ourselves back on track.
Jen, did you have anything that you wanted to offer?
I just wanted to mention the Native American idea of rematriation. So at a social level, we're doing what Nané was talking about in remothering. And Darsha has been talking about as well, with the evolved nest and the concentration on really the mother model, the mothering model. That so it's a way of changing both society as rematriating society, and promoting remothering of individuals. So the two help each other.
Yes, that's beautiful. Okay, Judith, do you have another question for us? You need to unmute.
Oh, sorry, I put on my picture instead of my voice. Nané spoke about the mother blessing circle and had a photograph of a mother blessing circle. And I wonder if you could say more about that, who would be invited and what kinds of rituals you would do in that kind of a circle.
Oh yeah, totally. So yeah, thanks, Judith. That's great, because that's ceremony, what Darsha was also saying about all the ceremonies. And, you know, I have, you know, my Indigenous colleagues talk about birth is a ceremony. Just giving birth is a ceremony. So how are we handling that ceremony? So the mother blessing is like a women's circle. And we used to do them. It was like Raven Lang, a midwife from California, brought that up. The midwife I studied with here in Vancouver was Gloria LeMay, who's yeah, and we used to have a circle and invite whoever the mother wanted. It was generally a women's circle, so it was female friends, and it's not a shower. It was a circle, a ritual space, a circle, and mom would invite female relatives, friends, whoever she wanted there. And generally the midwife or birth attendant or doula who was going to be supporting the mom would lead the circle for the mother. And we'd have an altar. I used to bring special things for like maiden, mother, crone, certain colors. I'd bring the goddess colors, which are the black, red, white, which are the sacred colors of most cultures, time immemorial, those three colors. And yeah, more to say about that, but, and then have candles and just some maybe things special for the mother. We'd go around the circle and introduce ourselves and how we knew the mother. We'd have a special rock where we'd actually put fears into the rock and then the mom would wash them. She'd wash those fears away. We'd go around again with the rock, holding our blessings and well wishes for the mom's birth. And we'd always do a thread ceremony. So we'd each be wearing a thread. Of course, my favorite is red thread. If you saw from my red placentas, and I actually make a lot of artwork with red thread as representing, that's the thread of life and the blood of life, and what we were used to call women's mysteries, which is the blood, the sacred blood of life. And that those women's mysteries are very much at the heart, I think, of how I feel the gift economy. So yeah, we'd all go away with that thread and just keep it on. And it's sort of like our promise to be holding that mother just with an intention for her birth, for her safe and wellness in her birth and that baby. Yeah, and beautiful. We sing songs. We had, back in the day, we had lots of all the old goddess songs. I still have books of songs for collected over the years. So just a very joyful, really lovely. And then have food, feast. There can be all kinds of versions of this circle or ceremony that women, might like to do. We had those kind of general things with the rock and the thread and singing, and sharing with the mother, what she means to us. So.
That's beautiful. I think that that particular ritual could be adapted for any creation that a woman needs support in, that she could call upon her circle of women and they could be there to bless her and support her. And I think that's part of what Darsha was talking about in having a community develop around you so that you can have that experience of feeling safe wherever you are, so that you're engaged in the world. And if each woman had a circle of women around her that included other women, then what Jen was talking about, how we make this movement happen quickly, it is to have lots of celebration and play around all the things that women are creating, and the world would change. So
Yeah.
I think we need to do that.
Yeah. That's totally true, Letecia. And the circle, we've done those circles for friends, at menopause, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yep.
Yeah.
Darsha, do you have any comments that you'd like to offer to this idea of ceremonies for women around childbirth or in general?
Well, I got married young and thought I could change an alcoholic partner. But after 9 years, it didn't work. And so I put together a divorce ceremony for myself with my friends, which was really helpful. You didn't feel alone, right? I mean, you feel so torn. And for me, it was like being dropped from an airplane without a parachute, the feeling, because I got married so young and thought marriage was forever. So yeah, I think that's marvelous. And to have your group there, even on a daily basis, right? You can do various things. I think also we have to remember we can do ceremony with the natural world around us. If we don't have the women, we do have trees and plants. I mean, even house plants, right? They're all alive and they're sentient and they have things to teach us. And we can talk to them. We can even talk to our ancestors, our spirits that guide us. And it's not, we're never alone. So to remember that, to feel that, and to honor our guides, our allies, our spiritual allies and guides each day. Our land gave me a song to sing to the land or with the land. And so when I go outside, I try to remember to sing it every time. So the Native Americans say that it's the land that teaches you. And I think we have to start to learn to listen, especially now when we've ravaged it so terribly. It's terribly wounded. So a new birth must come from that, from our being reborn in partnership with the land.
Gabriella is asking if you would sing to us, Darsha. If you would be willing
Yes,
to sing your song to us,
Which
please.
song? I have,
The land song.
the one that you just mentioned.
oh, that song. Yeah. Okay. All right. Nobody's listening. Except you guys. All right. I also have other songs. I have a Sing to the Insect song. I have a Partnership with the Plant song. And I have other things that I've been, Birds We Love song. But all right, this one is Ea, 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 ea.
Thank you, Darsha. Beautiful,
Oh, thanks.
beautiful. And Jen, this is Mother Earth Day weekend, so I was hoping that perhaps you might want to also offer your song to the earth.
Yeah,
Would you be willing to? And
Nané might have a song too.
yes, and I want you to, those of you who don't know, Jen does have an album out of songs, so you can check her website. So thank you, Darsha. That was so beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
I'll just sing more the chorus of it one. So, Mother Earth, we are grateful for our birth. Our rainbow loves do you embrace, shining in the night of space. Then there is a verse that I'll sing. For 4.5 billion years, you listen to the music of the spheres, while all of life's variety issued from your creativity. Mother Earth, we are grateful for our birth.
Thank you, Jen. That was beautiful. Perfect for this weekend and for the day. Nané, would you like to offer your voice into the singing circle? We've just
Oh.
changed our.
I think so. I think I better, Letecia. I just was like, what song is there? But I just had, oh, there's so many. The one that came into my head, I'll just sing it. There's a river of birds in migration, a nation of women with wings. There's a river of birds in migration, a nation of women with wings. Hoof and horn, all that dies shall be reborn. Hoof and horn, all that dies shall be reborn, like a drop of rain flowing to the ocean. We all come from the mother, unto her we shall return.
Thank you so much, Nané. And for those of you listening, I want you to know that we secretly added some stealth in to stimulate your vagal nerve so that you feel safer.
Woohoo!
Too funny.
I was paying attention, Darsha.
I guess so. Well done. Woo. Laughing helps too. Laughing.
My goodness, that was so fabulous. Darsha, I pointed this out to Darsha earlier today, and she has a list of the dominant Indigenous worldview manifestations. Is this also on your website?
Yes. If you, it's
Yeah.
at, I can put the link in if you like. Let me find
Yeah,
it.
it's the dominant and Indigenous worldview manifestations. And it's just, as I was looking at it, I was just thinking that these worldviews, if we could change the dominant worldview to what they have as the Indigenous worldview, it's another name for the gateway to the maternal gift economy. That's what we're talking about here.
Yes.
So yes.
Put the link in it. Maybe you can tell people how to save the chat. Some people may not know.
Yeah, I think that when we're in this particular Zoom format, the chat is not saved. You can't save it at your location if you're not a
yeah.
panelist.
Oh, I
And
see.
yeah, because it's the webinar. It's not a meeting.
Because I can see I can save it, but
Right, but we can make it available at our website when we put up the video as a download, that Diane can do that for us so we can make sure that that happens. All right, everyone. For those of you who are listening, can you believe that we've actually moved through 2 hours? It's shocking to me. We have just a few minutes left, and I really do want to thank everyone who has been with us, especially our speakers, Nané, Jordan, and Darsha Navarras. It has been such a pleasure. Liliana and Judith for making sure that some of our questions here got answered. And for those of you who did post questions and comments, both Nané and Darsha will get a copy of the questions that you've posed and a copy of the chat. We'll make sure that they get it, and perhaps they'll be able to have a dialogue with you if they have time. And our technical support, Diane, thank you so much always for making sure that we stay steady and stay up in our Zoom room, Genevieve, Vaughan, and the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. And thank you each for joining us. We want to invite you back on May 7th for Salon number 32 with our main speaker is going to be Genevieve Vaughan. And Genevieve, would you just like to say a few words about what you're going to be presenting? I'm just so thrilled.
Well, the title is going to be Marx, the Market, and the Mother. And so I'm going to try to critique exchange and also Marx's idea of how exchange works and use that to show how the market and exchange are dependent on the mother, on the gift, and how they exploit that. And that's what our economy is doing, and it's doing it also to exploit and destroy the earth. So happy Earth Day.
Thank you, Jen. And for those of you who've been with us for the Gift in the Heart of Language and the Money salons, the format will be the same. So Jen will present and then she'll bring guests on. And I think one of them is Angela Miles, who's with us today in the audience. But there will be others, and they will be responding to what Jen has to offer. It should be very interesting. And each time that we hear these conversations like this with Jen, it provides more insight into how the gift economy has just been occluded by the dominant discourse. So please do come back to be with us in May and invite all of your friends. So our recording is definitely going to be up at our website, thematernalgifteconomy.org. If you'd like to be notified of any of our future upcoming websites and events, Genevieve has her book coming out in Italian, so that will be something special that we'll also do something on. Please sign up at our website, or you can send questions and comments to us at thematernalgifteconomy@gmail.com. So we will see you in 2 weeks, May the 7th. Stay safe, be well, and be kind to one another. And everyone, thoughts of peace and plenty. Take good care. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Letecia.
Yes.